Good evening, ladies and the gentlemen who could be watching, or gentlemen. You're very welcome to Christian Women in the UK with the lovely Giselle and the amazing Sidonie. Guys, can you see her hair? Can you check out?
Yeah, gorgeous.
I'm here in total.
Thank you.
You're very welcome to this second part of our discussion on submission. We had a great discussion last week, and thank you all very much who watched the video. We can see from the Facebook group that there was a lot of activity. People had a lot to say and questions to ask. So today we're going to be delving deeper and really looking at what people want to know about submission. So we've been on the group, we've been looking online and seeing this is a hot topic, as you all know. So I think I'll go first to Giselle. Giselle, I believe you have a list of questions there. So what we can do is, Sidonie, do you have any questions in front of you?
No, I'm just trying to get to the poll on Facebook that we did. So we did
an interesting one as well. We did a poll, which once Sidonie gets it, then we'll be able to see. But at the moment, I think what we'll do, Giselle, if you've got the questions ready, what you can start doing, then if you read it out, and then you can answer one, Sidonie takes another one. I'll chime in as I can. But seeing as you two are married, you're the experts on the one. Okay.
Oh, nice one, my dear.
But
Don't worry, I don't have any surprises up my sleeve for you tonight, the way I did last week.
So ladies, please listen and learn. It was a very big learning experience for me. So try and put your ideas to the side for 1 minute and just listen. Come with an open mind.
There you go. There you go. Well, what some of the questions were Sidonie had suggested, which I think are absolutely fantastic questions, that to talk about raising men, sons, brothers, cousins, that to understand and practice their biblical call as husbands, because husbands should submit to their wives as well. As we said last week, the scriptures do tell us that wives submit to their husbands, and several verses later, Paul then also said, and husbands do likewise. And as we discussed last week, it's not about submission being told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, although that's what some marriages are like. It's submission to Christ.
Yeah.
And when people realize it's submission to Christ, and when Christ is the head of your marriage, of your household, then everything falls into order. Your ducks are all lined up in a row, so to speak. And when it's not like that, if one's pulling against the other and the couples going their separate ways and all the rest of it, then there's turmoil and upset and confusion and hatred and anger and bitterness. And which you also then, that when some men do take the submission role to the highest level, and the woman is not allowed to speak in public, that's not what Christ meant.
That's oppression. That's a difference. And I think it's really important what you say, Giselle, because we need to really come to a distinction between submission and oppression. Because I think what some men and even some women think is that submission means just sit quietly, don't say anything, you know. And I think this is why I'm so pleased that Sidonie said what she said, because sometimes a lot of the kickback that you get from women about submission is because, one, it's been misdefined, but also two, because a lot, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of the teaching that I've seen about this topic tends to be directed at women. Yeah. We are women's ministry, so that's a different case, right? We're looking at things that concern women. But even when you go to churches where you have men, you have women, a lot of the time, the message that comes from the pulpit, just as it's weird because it's also a reflection of society. A lot of the time in society, everything to do with fixing a family is a woman's problem. If a man cheats on his wife, it's her fault somehow. You know, she should have cooked better. She should have, you know, made herself look nice better. Or maybe she doesn't have kids if she was having children. So it's a very weird thing where the world and the church, there's that conflation where people don't really realize. And it's so important what you said, Giselle, that submission is submission to Christ, as opposed to, oh, my husband just wants me to do this, you know. So I think if we really we're clear about it, and men also became more aware of what their responsibilities are, I think you'll find that women will be more receptive to this teaching, to be honest.
Exactly. And like, as I said last week, what submission really is, biblical submission is selflessness, serve, accountability, respect. That's it. To me, that's what submission is. And it has to work both ways.
Yeah.
We can't demand respect. Respect has to be earned. So if a man isn't being respected by his wife, then what's he doing wrong to not be respected? And vice versa.
But that's a good point. Because
that's a good point, because there was a lady that brought that up in the Facebook group, didn't she?
About
there was one of the sisters that said that. She said it's easier for a woman to submit to a man that was holding his end of the bargain. The biblical bargain is easier. And that's true.
Absolutely. And even there was another woman who made a comment about her husband more or less kind of just wanting her to do everything. I think that's like the other end, right? Where it almost becomes like the husband takes a supine role. Yep. To me, that's an abdication of the role. It's fine for you to your wife, yes, manage everything. But then it's almost as if you're not even really interested in this thing. You just want to kind of pass the buck. So to me, I don't even see that as being a liberal, quote unquote, liberal person. So I think it can be just as frustrating if you have a partner who's very oppressive as it can be if you have a partner who just kind of steps back and doesn't want to do anything, because then you're not either.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you have some women who, I think there's this whole mix-up at the moment. I say mix-up, but it's probably not. This whole egalitarian movement, which I think Stephanie alluded to last week about this feminism, the new wave of feminism that's washing through our current culture. So I think it's important to make the distinction between, yes, it's a biblical principle, and we all know biblical principles are timeless. You know, they hold true as 50 years ago, 1,000 years ago, today, and 1,000 years to come. They'll still be true. Yep. Ephesians is quite clear. It says we're to submit to each other. But it also, I think 2 verses later, which is what I said to a lady on one of the comments on the poll, I said it's also clear. It says that the wife should submit to the husband, just as the church submits to Christ, because the husband is the head of the household. And so there's an honor that comes with that. And yes, you know, the church, I mean, the Bible, Christianity is clear. We're against every form of oppression or abuse. I mean, Christ himself was the very first people. He ate with sinners. I mean, he ate with tax collectors and the lowest of the low. So Christ's living example is that he's against any form of discrimination or oppression. But I think what we're finding at the moment is that there's a kind of modernism where women are in pursuit of equality in the wider world. Christian women are trying to bring those wider secular ideas into the Christian home, marriage, and family. And I think that's where we need to be careful. So it's fine when you're out there, pursue your egalitarian. I mean, we all want to be paid the same for the same job that we do. You know, we all want, you know, gender equality, as it were. Even that within reason, because again, like Stephanie said, I'm also kind of the school of thought of Stephanie, where there are things that I could do that a man can't do. I can have kids, a man can't have kids, and you know, and vice versa. Yep. So I think even in pursuing our gender equality, there should be some kind of idea that bears that in mind, you know. But I also think it's very important, because we have a new wave of certainly a lot of young women that I speak to are going through this whole thing of, yes, you know, he's my equal, and then they're using, I think it's Ephesians, to back that up and say he's also to submit to me as I submit to him. I say, yes, that's fine. And that's what Giselle said. It's mutual respect, it's mutual care, it's him taking your counsel on board and him asking your opinion. But at the end of the day, he's been appointed by God as the head of that family. And that's something that God makes quite clear. It's there, you know, 2 verses later. And that's something that any Christian man will know, that he'll be held to account to that.
I don't think many of
on
them
the judgment day. Well, they need to start listening to us then and know that.
I think they need to, because, you know, it's funny to me, because even from a non-Christian point of view, it's somewhat baffling to me, because I even think, even in a marriage where it's egalitarian, right? Let's just say, I often think you still have to respect your husband. You still have to take his ideas into consideration. I would never, even in my wildest feminist days, have ever said to a woman, just go and do something without asking your husband. Because to me, I think sometimes maybe, again, we need to bring these things back to just consideration and say, love one another, right? How would you feel if your husband just went and did something without you? Or how would you as a wife feel? Or you, how would you feel? So sometimes it's even just common sense to say, how would you? And I love the bit where Jesus says, where the Bible says, men, treat your wives the way you would treat yourselves, because that's what it really comes down to. Exactly. If you were that very simple principle, it would be very difficult for you to undermine your partner. You know, you wouldn't, you know, even if you thought that school was better for your child, just because you know that your husband is somebody who has feelings, who as the father of that child has authority, you won't just go and put that, like, go and do an application for that child. I mean, it's true, there are some people who are crazy enough to do it. But to me, it boils down to, I mean, I've heard some stuff that their husbands or wives, and it completely floors me. I'm just like, where is the basic respect for this person's humanity? Never even mind the Bible, right? Because there are couples, and I was thinking about a couple that I know today. I don't think they're Christians. I don't think they're even particularly religious, but in a very interesting way, they are literally living out this biblical principle, just because of the way the man and his wife are. When I remember him talking about their marriage and how they do things, they are literally living it out without even knowing Jesus. So this is something that people can do it, but like, you're right. I think a lot of the time too, sometimes I tend to wonder how people arrive at the decisions that they make in their lives. And I think sometimes people's past experiences or the role models that they've seen in their families affect their attitude towards submission. So I think it's worth considering those things when we're dealing with people, particularly if they come to us for counseling, because for me, the way I see it, particularly with a lot of young women, it's a defense thing. You know, if you've grown up in a home where maybe your father was abusive to your mother, and she had been told to submit, as some old school churches did, then it's no surprise that you don't want to hear about submission. Or if you saw a father who was maybe not really living up to his role, and your mother had to do everything, but still kind of have to pay tribute to this man, and even sometimes have to lie that he had done things that he hadn't done. You're like, I'm not doing this. So I think it's really also important to not just look at how people come, because we know that when people know the right thing about the gospel, it can be transformative. So yeah, how I feel.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm just looking at the poll, and so it was quite, actually, we had 259 was the post reach. We had 41 comments. I think we had something like 26 votes. So, and the first poll, 19 people voted that yes, it's a biblical principle. It's not old and it's not out of date. No. Should we still be practicing this? I think that was a controversial question. We had 6 women that said no. 1 woman was undecided. And I think on the second poll as well, we had quite a few that said no, we shouldn't be practicing it. And I mean, what do you ladies think? Do you think it's obviously it's down to everybody to sort of make their own minds up, but the Bible is clear. We should be. And I know on the other poll, another woman sort of made a comment as to say, I can't remember, but if I remember rightly, I'll find it in a moment. She made a comment to say, almost as if she'll submit if her husband were to love her the way he's instructed to in Ephesians. But then I said to her, well, your obedience to Christ is not dependent on somebody else's actions. We're told to love our enemies. We're told to pray for those and love those who persecute us. That's a hard thing to do.
Very hard.
And so, you know, the way I see it, and your obedience, and God should give us all grace to do this because it is hard. Your obedience to God's commands or principles or the Christian way of life should not be dependent on the man's obedience, because at the end of the day, you're not obeying the man, you're obeying Christ. You're submitting to him out of reverence for Christ. You're submitting to him because that's what you've been asked to do. And it's like that story we were reading, weren't we, last week, where can't remember now, I think this woman who was unequally yoked and her husband wasn't a believer. I think it was Naamah, and David comes to the husband and asks for food. Yeah, and then she says no, the husband says no, and then behind the husband's back, she rides out to meet David and gives them food. And she basically saves the rest of her household by doing that, because David was intending to come back and kill them. And so, you know, yes, we should submit to them. Even we're even told to submit to unbelievers, husbands that are unbelievers, because in so doing, we will show them the way of Christ and the way to the Lord. Now that's hard, because an unbelieving husband may not necessarily know how to be an Ephesians husband.
Yeah, and it can take time. I mean, I know somebody who I think did that and it worked out for her, but it took 8 years for it to happen, right? But I really love what you said, because I think sometimes it's that natural thing in life where we think, if I do something good to you, you do something good to me, right? And I was actually thinking about this today. I had to remind myself, because it goes even beyond marriage. It goes even with friendships, with your siblings or whatever. And there's a time where I've actually had God correct me and say, look, okay, you have a shared duty with somebody, but just do your own part, whether they do their part or not. And it was a sobering thing for me. But I also came to realize that, you know, when you're in front of God's judgment seat, you're there by yourself, even if you were born, right? So God is not, and I mean, God set the precedent for us in the Garden of Eden. Before Adam was like, oh yeah, the woman, God was like, I'm not even hearing that. You know, he was judged for his own actions. So I think if we keep that at the back of our minds to know that, yes, that husband may be the most annoying man on the planet, but at the end of the day, when you're saying to God, oh, my husband did, God is going to be like, yeah, I know, but I'm talking about you. So, yeah. And the same, the husband, he may sit now and say whatever, but God is going to be like, no matter what your wife did, you should be leading. So I think if we really kept that in perspective, and I have to say that also, I've heard a situation where this woman was saying about, you know, the conditionality of it. I've heard a situation where a preacher actually preached incorrectly about this. He more or less implied that if men are not being loving husbands, they shouldn't be, like, it's almost like you have to be a loving husband for your wife to submit to you. That's
wrong.
pretty much how it came out. So I think there's also a responsibility on our preachers to really preach this thing concisely, because that was a huge congregation in that church, right? And if people walked away from the church feeling that way, then imagine
that's not a biblical truth. That's his version. I mean, Giselle, what do you think as a pastor? Giselle?
Yeah, I'm trying to form this. My version of Ephesians, I'm reading an NLT version, and in Ephesians 5, verse 25, it says, And you husbands must love your wives with the same love.
Must. Not you must, not maybe, you may, you must.
No, must. Yeah, must love your wives. Must love your wives.
By force, you must.
Nigel, you said it earlier, treat others how you want to be treated. So yeah, you must love your wives. You must love your husbands. That's earning respect. That's not demanding respect. When you go into marriage, it's not, you don't promise to maybe love, maybe honor, maybe obey. It's you. I promise to love, honor, obey through sickness and health, richer for poor, better for.
People write their own vows now.
Oh, I said obey. I said obey. You're a thoroughly modern Millie Moore, I tell you.
Yeah, I said love, honor, and obey. Yes, in my vows. Yes,
but my husband said the same vows back to me, that he would love, honor, and obey me.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
It's a two-way street. I didn't say it. He just said,
she said that's right.
I can submit to you. I don't know about obeying. Nah, I think it's a bit more. I'll obey my father.
It's funny though, because I mean, what I've learned is if you submit out of obedience to Christ, he will work on the husband.
Amen.
No word of a lie.
Amen.
No word of a lie. You know, there are areas in every marriage, the areas of disagreements, areas of tension, because it's two different people that come together. But when you decide to submit, you are saying, so think about this, right? In the Garden of Eden, God made Adam, looked at Adam after he'd made creation and thought, oh, it's not good for this man to be alone. I'm going to make him a helper. Right? I'm going to make you, that's the word that's used, a helper, a helpmeet, to tend to the garden, to look after creation. So the garden, creation, was Adam's, it was put under Adam's dominion. And then when God made Eve, he made Eve Adam's helper. And then he says, together you should go out. But before Eve even came about, he had told Adam to name the creatures of the earth. So he had given Adam that power of dominion before Eve even came about. Now he says to Eve, you have to help this man to look after this wonderful world that I've given him. So if you're thinking about it that way, and the woman's meant to be a helper, then my thought to you is, don't marry a man whose project or whose life journey you don't agree to, because you have to submit to that. You have to buy into his project, his Garden of Eden.
Exactly.
You know, this is such a good point. I think that came up on Facebook, and it almost feels like we need a whole topic about this, because I think you're right. Sometimes submission is difficult also because people choose the wrong partners.
Yeah.
And I think if you I don't know, if you were with somebody whose vision of life was just so different from yours, sometimes it's not even that you don't want to submit. It's just like, I don't know, for example, I don't know if say I met somebody today who was like a roving musician, right? You wanted to go all around the world on tour. I don't think that would be for me, because that is a very difficult thing. I'm the kind of person who likes somebody to be at home.
Yeah.
You know, I like somebody who is very family oriented, or you really want to be. But you know how some men are just very hands off. They are just like, if I'm giving you money, that's it, right? So for me, that would just never work. But now if I pretend that I'm cool with this project, maybe because this guy is making a lot of money, and I feel like, okay, yes, I will grow into it. It may not happen. You know, I might say like, okay, you need to stop it. And then now I'm trying to stop him from doing what he loves, what maybe is his calling, to go around the world touring.
But that's also wrong because of you, because you're not being a helper. You're being a destroyer.
Our views are so different. And I think this is where somebody made a comment which was really good. And I think women also need to realize that they have the power, you know, the
power of choice. Before you say I do.
Of course, are not so much there anymore, where you could say, oh, I'm stuck with this man because my parents forced me. Today, you have the opportunity to meet somebody, get to know them, know what their vision is. So if you're sitting on that table and this guy is being honest with you and telling you, look, this is my life, this is what I want, please don't think you can change him.
No,
If you're not
no.
buying into that vision, that is the time to pull out. It doesn't matter how good looking he is, how wealthy he is. In the heat of the moment, you won't be seeing those things. So I think also people really need to take responsibility for who they choose. The same thing with men. If a woman is not looking like she's buying into your vision, please don't think that when you marry her, she'll change.
Exactly. Like all too often, women especially,
ladies,
married,
carry on without me. I'll be back in a minute.
I'll be able to change him. He's not exactly how I want him to be, but I'll change him.
Oh yes, the Holy Spirit can do that. You're not
wrong. That really is wrong. It is.
No. And I mean, it's kind of arrogant, actually. Who do you think you are going to change someone's personality? Because you know what? Sometimes, and this is where I think Jesus again comes in, because sometimes we have our ideas of what is good, what is righteous, and God does not necessarily see those things. You know, you may look at the guy and say, you know, he's this way, oh, he's too laid back or whatever, but God can do something with that laid backness of his.
Of course
God will not have a problem with that. You know, it's just like the woman at the well, right? The whole city thought this woman was useless because she'd been with 5 husbands. But that was just not the biggest issue to Jesus.
No.
You know, so I think sometimes people, you shouldn't want to change somebody. You should just be saying to God, please give me the person that I'm compatible with. Give me the person whose vision I can buy into, whose vision kind of tallies with mine, because it's also really important that a man supports his wife's own vision, you know, because I think people, sometimes it's almost as if women are expected to just subsume everything underneath a man's when they're married. And I personally would struggle with that, because I feel like a lot of women have been given their own vision, right? You know, God has given us all talents. You know, you meet women who are really smart. You know, they were topping their class at school, doing even better than, there are women who actually have even better degrees than their husbands or whatever, right? So I find it difficult. It's just hard for me to believe that God will want you to just drop all of that because you're married, right? So I think you need to find a man whose vision you can buy into, but who can also believe in your own vision, so that he's like, okay, I'm doing this thing, you're doing your thing, I'll support you. You know, I actually know somebody, a man who, he supported his wife to leave her job to start a business, because they were kind of doing this whole job thing. And his wife was very passionate about this business, but, you know, because of income, she was doing it, and, you know, and it got to a point where the husband was like, you know what, this thing is really your passion. Just give up your job and focus on the business, and I'll support all of us, you know. And it was a gamble. They did it and it worked. And today the business is big, right? Brilliant. This is probably what's gonna even support them for their retirement. So you also need a man who has that foresight.
Yes.
To see, because if God says that you're a helper, you're not just coming there to sit and be a spare part, right? So sometimes it's what's even in the woman that will help that marriage.
Yes.
So it's very important, I think, that men also need to not misinterpret the word, because I think some men think helper means handmaid. She'll just do what, like, she's there like a spare tire, sort of thing. And I think that's problematic. So while I want to buy into a man's vision, I think he also needs to see my helper potential. It may not necessarily even have to be with his job or his calling. It may be something different but complementary. You know? So that's, yeah, because for me, I find it, I've seen that where sometimes women are expected to give up their dreams because they're married. And while some women may be happy to do that, for other women, it may be crushing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it is sad that most times it is the woman's expected to give up her dream to bring up the children and look after the house and everything. And there's a lot of times that men give up their dreams too, because there's children come along maybe all too early. So again, you know, if the woman can support the man to follow his dream, it should be done. It's like last week we were talking about that. What if the woman earns more money and the man decides to stay at home and be a house husband? I have great respect for a man that does that. I really do. You know, so yes, it's a two-way street. It's got to be You respect each other, help each other. And that's what it is. Like as Sedona was saying earlier, that God created Adam, he created man, and then he created woman. And as we know, woman was created from Adam's side, from a rib from a side, not under his foot, to be trampled on, to be walked on, but by his side to walk through life together.
I'll tell you, God is very smart, because clearly God had seen that there was so much that man could not achieve on his own. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I think God also did it deliberately, because we already know that when the devil was beautiful and complete, he became proud.
Yes.
And I think God gave the man that, how can I put it, the need for a helper to also check his pride. You know?
Good point.
And I think even for women, I think that the reason why men have that headship position over women is to also check women's pride.
Yeah.
Because I really think it's a check and balance system. But because today, you know, again, we've moved away from the word of God, and people have interpreted it in all kinds of crazy ways. So we are not seeing. And I think Sidonie mentioned something about modernism. The thing is, it's not to say that ancient societies were perfect. You really need to open the Bible to see how terrible things were going on. If you look at our situation today, nobody, even the secular world, acknowledges it. Just the lack of father absenteeism, we can see the sociological result of it, right?
Time.
Whether those fathers choose to walk away from the family or something happens, but just the fact that the headship of a father is not there as it used to be, we are seeing it in jail terms, in family breakdown. So even from a secular point of view, honest sociologists will tell you these things. So there are consequences when we move away from the word of God. Are people happier today? Let's be honest. Okay, when you hear something like, is it 1 in 3 marriages will end in divorce or something in the UK? It's fair enough. You have the right. You can walk away from that marriage. But are people genuinely happier today now that we have all this right? That's the question we must ask ourselves.
What our society today, it's too much of a throwaway society. Like even electronic devices we buy, they're cheap, they're cheerful. You they'll last a year, maybe 2 years, you chuck them away, you don't fix them. When they break down, you chuck them away, buy another one. And relationships are being treated the same way. People don't seem to put the time and effort into trying to fix anything nowadays. And it is, but it's sad. We have 5 minutes, 7 seconds left.
Absolutely. So, it's been a very interesting one. It's almost been like a therapy session. But I think in conclusion, then, I think what we've really done is look at a mixture of I think it's turned out to be more like a complementary role between the man and the woman. So I think we'll get to those questions next week, but I think we'll just do what we normally do, our last words, if you like, for the session. So Sidonie, now that you're back, let's hear from you. What have you got to say to the ladies and the gentlemen? I know some of them are probably hiding at the back of the couch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, the men should live out the biblical role of a husband in Ephesians 5. But I think women your obedience to Christ should not be dependent on your husband's obedience to Christ, because like we've all said, on the judgment day, you will stand in front of God to give account for your life, not because he did X, Y, Z. Just like Adam stood in front of God for his judgment, even though he tried to pass the blame to Eve. He stood there and took his own punishment and his own judgment. So we will be accountable for what we decide to do. Again, you know, we're not saying submission is not oppression and it's not abuse. If you find yourself in that situation, please seek help and leave if you need to. But it's certainly, you have a voice and that voice deserves to be heard. But, you know, in the same breath, your husband is the head of the house and he deserves to be honored. And the only other person above that is God. And that's only within a marriage. Out there, you can go and be the CEO of the world, the boss lady.
Exactly. No, but that's a very important point, because I think some men simplify, you know. Some men think that women should just submit to them because they're men. So that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Giselle, over to you.
Well, I can't say anything. Sidoni said it all. I agree with everything she said. And I especially like the part that you say too, that if someone is in a relationship where they really are being under the thumb, can't breathe without being told to, they need to seek help. They really do. And a Christian women in the UK, we're there to help them. We can maybe find out some, and that might be an idea too. Let's find out some links, some resources that we can even post for people. That
we will. That's a great idea.
Because somebody might not want to admit that they're living a life like that. But if they had the links and the support there, they could do it privately.
Access it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea, Giselle. We'll look into that.
I have one every now and again, don't I?
You do, don't you? That's your second one today.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah, TI was that chief of idea, COI. So honestly, she's a CIO already. Chief is that what, IT officer? Now should be a COI. So I think, Sidoni, you raised a very important thing, and you and I have had conversations about it, about women being able to raise children, right? Their boys, to be more responsible. And I think while you cannot discount the role of the father, right? It's very there, and we've already spoken about the lack of role modeling. I think women also have a role that is quite strategic, because the more I think about it, God doesn't think like people. And it's something that women need to know more. The fact that as a mother, we tend to be the ones who have closer relationships with the children. That ability to influence children is such power that a lot of women don't recognize. And I really think that if we're going to raise the next generation of men who will be these amazing men, it's actually in the hands of women, aunties, moms. We can raise the kind of men that some of us wish we were married to. Right?
Amen.
I agree.
Children, but you can easily correct those mistakes when they are little boys, when you can influence them. So I really think it's a hidden power that a lot of women don't realize they have. And I really think it's a divine masterstroke. If you really don't believe God is pro-women, this is one thing that shows you. Because I think God, God knew what men were going to do. But look, and he was like, and women were under their sleep.
God is God is pro-woman. Look at all the women he used in the Bible. Come on, come on. Don't get me started in that. Right.
Yeah, I think but it's something that a lot of women and again, I think it gets buried sometimes under a lot of this equality thing. Yes, we're not saying that it's telling fathers not to be there. But you know what? Sometimes if that father is disruptive, it's not the most terrible thing if he's actually out of the way, so you can teach your son to be a better man. To be honest, I've learned to be optimistic about this topic.
Right, that's it.
Oh, great.
We need
Thank
to go.
you, Giselle. Good night, ladies.
Right.
From Christian women in the UK. See you next week.
Till next. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.